Arc Hunter gotta be the most confusing class in the game. I mean, it's a class about punching, which is, kinda tightens the whole thing, but it still makes sense on Hunter. In fact, with the crazy melee builds on Prismatic Hunter, I'd argue we have a common case of identity theft on our hands here. So I did what any logical scammer would, and looked for my next target. Why just settle for punching when ability spam is right around the corner? That's right, Arc Warlocks, y'all ain't safe. Today we'll be combining Gifted Conviction exotic armor with the Delicate Tomb exotic fusion rifle. Alongside my selected aspects and fragments, we'll be turning into a goddamn juggernaut. This build provides a total of 83% damage reduction, excellent ad clear, with a whole lot of jolt and blinding, constant amplification and orbs of light for yourself and allies, quick ability regen, and even healing to keep yourself in the fight. Now let's get into it. The required items for the build are as follows. I already stated the exotic, being the Gifted Conviction and the Delicate Tomb fusion rifle. We'll be using the Arc subclass with Marksman Dodge, Disorienting Blow, Flashbang Grenades, the Ascension aspect, the Flow State aspect, and the following fragments. The super is up to you, however I recommend the Gathering Storm for good burst DPS on those beefy targets. For the kinetic weapon, any weapon with anti-barrier is preferred, as the build has no other way to deal with those type of champions. I personally use a Shattering Bone with kinetic tremors. Finally, for the heavy weapon, I'm using the Gold Tusk with Unrelenting and Chain Reaction. Now give me a second, I know some of you guys are giving me a side eye. I'll explain why in the video later. It's pretty important for the build. If you don't have the Gold Tusk, any Arc Sword will be fine. Just try to have Unrelenting on it. I'll put up some potential replacements for you on the screen right now. And these are the artifact mods required for the build. For your armor, the most important thing is that you have 100 resilience. The other stats can be what you like since the build has such good ability regen anyway. These are the mods I used in my specific build. For the chest piece, the resistance mods used will depend on the activity. For example, in the Warlord's Rune gameplay in the back, I used melee and solar resistance due to most enemies dealing melee and some of them doing solar. I'm talking to those guys with little chandelier thingies, I hate those guys. Keep in mind, this build is spec for close range combat when thinking of your biggest threats. Now let's break down why each component of this build is important. Starting with the sword, since I'm sure some of you raised your eyebrows, ready to pounce at me in the comments. For some reason, the Ascension aspect counts as a light sword attack. Only when wielding a sword though. I know, confusing, but it makes the aspect significantly better. If you use the ability while wielding a sword, it does far more damage, almost double, or around double, and it activates any perk on the equipped sword. You starting to connect the dots here? Because of Unrelenting on the sword, multi-kills with Ascension will both heal you and activate the damage reduction from Gifted Conviction. Speaking of Gifted Conviction, a quick explanation on the chest piece for anyone who hasn't heard of it yet. It improves both Ascension and Tempest Strike aspects, granting them explosives that jolt targets. Jolting these targets grants damage reduction second up to 4 times, at 4 times provides 50% damage reduction for 10 seconds, and this timer refreshes after each jolt that follows. This build has plenty of ways to proc jolt by the way. Ascension, Arc Weapon Final Blows while amplified due to the Shock and Awe artifact mod, and from Delicate Tomb after collecting Ionic Traces. We'll be pumping Ionic Traces thanks to the fusion's intrinsic trait and Spark of Ions. I'll tell you what too, Ionic Traces gotta be my favorite elemental pickup. Unlike the others which just sit around like your unemployed friend on Monday mornings, Ionic Traces seek you out, they want to help you, and help they do. Providing ability energy once collected, they are a big reason why ability regen in this build is so strong. After all, look at my stats. Not exactly witness killing material. To aid with ability regen, I did throw in Dynamo and some font mods. Not necessary, but does help, especially since this build will always have armor charge procced, thanks to these mods. The 83% damage reduction comes from multiple sources, 50% from Gifted Conviction, 30% from tier 10 resilience, 30% from galvanic armor which activates once amplified, 25% from spark of resistance, and 5% from resistance mod. For those of you wondering how the math works out, damage reduction in this game does not stack with each other, but is instead multiplicative. This is how I got the 83% value. Now, I know 83% damage reduction sounds great, but in endgame content enemies will still sting. The DR kinda just prevents you from falling over from a poke. Health regeneration is necessary for any close range loadout. We already discussed Unrelenting in this build, but we'll also be making use of Recuperation. This mod gives you a health bump after picking up an Orb of Light. If you use the armor mod shown earlier in the video, you'll be pumping out these orbs like your Bungie handing out unemployment notices. Only problem with this method of healing is seeking out orbs while in combat isn't exactly the best strategy. That's why we're using Powerful Attraction. This collects all nearby orbs when using your class ability, effectively giving you the Worm Husk effect. You can see this in action in this clip. Unfortunately, Ascension doesn't count as a class ability, so it won't proc Powerful Attraction. Probably has something to do with it recognizing it's a sword, I don't know. However, due to the ridiculous dodge recharge in this build, you can use your class ability for either purpose without worrying about being on a cooldown. Speaking about Ascension, a cool little gimmick about this build is since Ascension counts as a sword, it activates Arc Siphon and Reaper at the same time, meaning an Ascension multi-kill will grant you 2 Orbs of Light. You're probably asking yourself, geez, is there anything Ascension can't do? Well, for one, it can't fix my terrible upload schedule, that's a lost cause, but it can also blind thanks to the Spark of Beacon Fragment. This helps deal with the beefier targets who don't die to the jolts and explosions. That alongside the Flashbang Grenade makes unstopped champions and any major a piece of cake to deal with. Another benefit of this build is the constant support to your allies. They are not saving the day like Rakesh from tech support, but you are giving them constant amplification and orbs of power. Depending on their build, this will drastically improve their ability regen. For a quick summary of this build's strengths, it's excellent for close range engagements due to its incredible ad clear and survivability. It makes use of all arc abilities and is able to deal with all types of champions. Provide supports for your allies, and most importantly, it's incredibly fun to use, so give it a try. It's also important to note where this build isn't good. Since it relies on constant engagement to keep its bus up, and is more catered to close range damage output, it struggles in encounters where enemies are spread apart. Think like encounters with a lot of snipers. Its boss DPS also isn't anything to brag about. Still better than anything Zaval puts out though, and can still deal with majors and champions with no problem. Hope you give this build a try. If you do, let me know how you like it in the comments. Leave a like and subscribe if you want more videos like this. This has been TK Limitless. Until next time, peace.